Might be a little late for this video, but this is a consideration of the presidential election and how Christians should vote. There's several ways to look at this biblically, since in the time and place of Jesus there was no voting. They didn't have a say in the government, so we can't say for sure what Jesus would have taught about that. So first thing, we have to hit this issue with humility. We don't really know. One argument is that Christians shouldn't vote at all because that's seeking for power in the kingdoms of men. It's a very small amount of power, but it is a power in the kingdoms of men. So certainly worth considering that perhaps you shouldn't vote at all. But there's no Bible verse that says that, so it's not something you can take as a law. Another consideration is the question, do you have to vote for one of the top two candidates, or is it optional to vote third party or write-in candidate? Some would argue that, well, if you don't vote for one of the top two, you're throwing your vote away. You have to vote for someone who has at least a reasonable chance to win. One problem with that argument is sometimes there's just no way anyone other than the top one candidate is going to win. Does that mean you have to vote for that guy even if you think number two would be better? Most people would say you can vote for that number two even if you think number two has no chance to win. So if that's the case, then it's certainly reasonable that you can vote for candidate number 3 or 4 or 5 or 10, even if you think that person has no chance to win, if in your conscience that person is the best for the job. One other thing to think about on the third party side of things is the third party candidate has no chance to win this time. Why would you ever vote for that person? Well, if you want your third party to ever progress to where it can win something, you got to vote for them when they can't. Because when you're voting for something, you're not just voting for something for 4 years. You got to be thinking longer term than that. So, in my view, it's certainly reasonable to vote for a third party candidate who has no chance to win in the hopes that down the road they will have a positive impact. Well, let's assume you've decided that yes, Christians can and or should vote. So what am I going to do? Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. There's plenty of negatives for both people from a biblical perspective, from a Christian perspective. Both are in the pro-choice side of the abortion question. Kamala much more strongly in favor of abortion rights than Trump, but both are in favor of some abortion. There's no Bible verse that says thou shalt not have or perform or cause abortions. But the way I read the Bible, what I understand about God and about Jesus, it is impossible for me to interpret it in any way that would indicate that, yes, God puts his stamp of approval on abortions. So I personally could not vote for anyone who promotes abortion. A response to that might be, well, we're not called on to enforce Christianity, so if we promote anti-abortion laws, we're forcing our religious view on other people. Well, that's true of laws against stealing and things like that. Stealing is a moral question, just as abortion is a moral question. So I'm not trying to enforce my Christianity or my morality on other people with a stand on abortion any more than on a stand on stealing. And abortion is just one of many issues. Back in previous elections, when Donald Trump was not on the pro-choice side, there were still plenty of reasons not to vote for him from a Christian perspective. I'm not going to go through them here. There's plenty of people out there who've already done that. The bottom line for me is, under no circumstances could I see myself ever casting a vote for Donald Trump. Nor could I ever, under any circumstances, see myself casting a vote for Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton. Each one of those candidates has one or more things that, in my view, disqualify them from being someone I could put my stamp of approval on for being elected to an office. But that's me. Someone else may look at it and say, well, both candidates, let's say they look at it and they say both candidates are evil. Well, one of them's a greater evil than the other. So they feel like they have to vote for the lesser of two evils. And let's say they've taken the stand that, well, they have to vote for one of the top two or they're throwing their vote away. I don't agree with that viewpoint, but if that's what they've decided, then I can't fault them for choosing the one that they perceive as the lesser of two evils. Another thing people will look at is the personal character of the person. Let's say candidate A is a worse person than candidate B, but candidate A is in favor of better policies than candidate B. What do you do? Again, that's an issue each person would have to decide based on his own conscience. So to sum up, there's several reasonable Christian positions. One, we shouldn't vote at all because that's seeking power in the kingdoms of men. Next, we can vote for a candidate who has no chance to win based on principles. Or we have to vote for someone who has a chance to win, so we may be forced to vote for the lesser of two evils. We have to use our own conscience to decide how much weight to give to the character of the individual versus the policies the individual happens to support. And we have to take into account that other people are going to look at this and determine things differently than we are, and we have to be humble enough to let their conscience dictate what they should do and let your conscience dictate what you should do.